Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ। আশা করছি আপনারা সবাই ভালো ঈদ কাটিয়েছেন, যারা ঈদ হলিডেজ করেছেন। আপনাদেরকে আজকের এই লেকচারে স্বাগতম। We are very pleased to have a very well respected and expert to give a presentation today. His name is Abu Sumon. He is going to be talking about climate public finance management in Bangladesh. And this is part one of his lecture. It's going to be a two-part lecture. This is the first part where he's going to focus on public finance, climate finance in Bangladesh, which he's been working on for some time now. And then after his presentation, we have two formal discussants. Firstly, Mr. Ranjit Chakravarti, former Additional Secretary, Ministry of Finance, and now Project Manager, Inclusive Budgeting and Finance for Climate Resilience, which is a UNDP supported to Government of Bangladesh Ministry of Finance project or program. And then we have Professor Mizan Arkan, who's the Deputy Director of ICAD, my center, and also the Program Coordinator of the LDC's Universities Consortium on Climate Change. And then we will have an open question and answer session where if you have any questions, you can give your questions. So let me start with a little short introduction to Abu Sumon. Abu Sumon has played an important role in taking forward the climate change fiscal reforms in Bangladesh. With over 20 years of expertise on a wide spectrum of development and management issues, he has led the formulation and adoption process of Climate Fiscal Framework 2020, and then a local climate financing framework, and then also climate public finance tracking methodology, and integrated it with the integrated budget and accounting system, globally known as IFMIS of Finance Division, Government of Bangladesh. So he's been integrally part of the Bangladesh government's very, very strong and successful integration of climate finance in national budgeting. Sumon, let me hand over to you. Give your presentation, and then we'll have the discussants. And then following that, we'll have some question and answer. Please go ahead. You're on mute. Unmute করতে হবে.
Okay.
Okay.
I can share my presentation now.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, we can see it. Go ahead.
Okay, sure. So, okay. First, I just want to mention that today we are not talking about the climate science or the global negotiation process whatsoever. So we will only focus on what is happening in Bangladesh in the climate fiscal reforms and the climate financing things. So this is, although this is for Bangladesh, I mean, this can also be replicated to other countries like Bangladesh. I mean, countries in transition or the small island countries and so on. I think although my fiscal and monetary policies are a bit off track for a common lecture, but I will not travel to that path. I will try to make it as much interactive as possible. But what I would say that before starting, I would try to agree with all of you at least 2 or 3 common ideas that will be central to my discussions today. So let's start. My outline of my lecture would be, well, country outline. If there is anybody who knows a little about Bangladesh or anything, I will say 1 or 2 lines about that. Why climate finance is important here in Bangladesh. Essential ideas and concepts to agree on that I already said. There are some problems, in Bangladesh. We have a good amount of policies, strategies, legal, the laws in terms of climate change, adaptation and mitigation, but we see some problems, integration in between, overlapping jurisdictional responsibilities among those plans and strategies. I will try to, see at least one or two instances what is happening there. Then number 5, I will try to I'll try to answer in a way how much money or resources are actually required to climate proof the development intervention in the country, and I will see it from the supply side. I mean, I think no one knows how much is actually needed to offset the possible amount of risks. I mean, we cannot just offset all the risks. There will obviously be, residual risk. So how much actually is needed, no one knows. We need to have, research on that. But what I will do, I would rely on the figures of the national budget and the development budget, and I will try to estimate how much money is actually required to climate proof that development budget. And I will discuss a little bit of how we track how much money is actually been provided through the budgetary system to climate proof the development. Is it 7%, 10%, 25%, 50%, or so on? So that comes with a climate public finance tracking methodology. And number 8, I will propose one or two small things for the gap financing of this climate, proofing thing. So that is the overall, structure of my lecture today. So without spending too much of time on that, I will go to, this slide just for seeing that, climate change mostly is all about water. Mostly, either it is too much of water or too less of water, or the quality of the water. Maybe it's, saline, too much saline. The water is not available on the surface. The groundwater is going down. So it's mostly, attributable to availability of water, be it drinkable, be it, irrigable, be it saline or not. So that is why you see in the circle, the yellow circle, this is Bangladesh, but the greater Ganges Brahmaputra basin, we all know that, it produces a huge amount of water, and almost 90-95% of water that flows through this small piece of land. So problem is there. In the wet season, too much of water; the dry season, too less of it. I mean, I won't talk much about it, but one more point I would say that in the north we have um, mountains or the hills, which creates flash floods. In the eastern side, we also have some hills and flash flood problems as well, and also the landslides. In the southern part, we have cyclones, storm surges, and salinity intrusion. And inside the country, we have the riverbank erosion and the floods and all these things. So, point is that every piece of land in the country is either affected by one or multiple hazards, as we say. So going forward, this is again a very common thing. Why climate finance? I have just listed 9 different kind of hazards that we can name, and below these 4 circles, it is showing 4 different mega events that has costed a huge amount of money, and which, if we estimate something around like 2 to 3% of our national GDP, with this one single event, we lose 2 to 3% of our GDP, where we are actually struggling to progress little by little of our GDP increase every year. So if one event loses that much, we must take care of this thing, and we must invest so that this amount doesn't happen. We should reduce the loss and damage that is actually happening in every 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years. Last 10 years, it was a very good 10 years. There was not so many of the big events, but every year we have recurrent floods and small cyclones that would have been bigger ones, but luckily it went through another way, through West Bengal to part of India to Myanmar and so on. So So we need to invest in this. That's the bottom line. So here I was saying that there are a few ideas we need to agree on before I, deliver my real, piece of my lecture. If we couldn't agree on this, my lecture would be, very, debatable and so on. So let's agree, or I would, request you to consider this one, that we cannot offset 100% of the risks. There will be something residual. And there is two ways to see, our actions. One is the baseline or the business as usual actions. The other is the climate smart actions. When we talk about climate smart actions, what is that? That is how we increase the benefits, the climatic benefits beyond the baseline or the business as usual actions. That is what it is shown in the graph. So the dotted line is like if we implement a business as usual or a baseline intervention, and the green line is showing actually the benefits, the added benefits that we can produce if we implement a climate smart, or we can say climate proof development interventions. So that is the idea one that we need to agree on before. The second one also talks about the same, but cost and benefit obviously has a big role to play. How much you invest and how much benefit we get from the investment. I will show you the data later on. That will make it more clear. So cost benefit is another important factor we need to agree on. The third one is why government should invest. Evidences of that. So as the time is not, will not permit me to talk too much on this, but I will just tell 2 points here. Since 1985 to 2007, the SARB population by cyclone shelters, for example, in 1985, there was only 2% population of, at risk we could accommodate. But in 2007, huge investment in constructing new cyclone shelters, improving the access to the cyclone shelters, make it more gender sensitive. So now we can accommodate like 70% of them until 2007. Construction of cyclone shelters at an average rate of 75% per year from 1991 to 1997 because of this 1991 mega cyclone. So every time something happens, we become reactive and we do so many of the things. And I will show in one of my slides that how we forget that something big can happen. That is in my discussion after a few slides. So let's go. Here the big point I want to make. You see the big table below. I will not discuss the table above. Big table. If you follow the column 3, the total investment in 1984, 91, 97, and 2007. So if you see the investments that are made in million taka, in 84 we invested 69.73 crore taka. It's in 10 lakh, million taka. So if that is the thing, and with this investment, how much savings we could make, damage savings. So it's like 998 crore taka. 9,981 crore taka. So if we look at this, in 1991, $1 million investment could save up to 143 million worth of damage and loss. The same thing in 1997, because the investments are actually being cumulative. So as we invest this year, next year, and next year, the damage and loss scenario keeps changing. Investment this year would save something next year, and then next year, and then next year. So in 1997, the ratio changes. The ratio changes like in 1984, compared to 1984, in 1997, the savings ratio goes up to 1.62 times. And in 1997, we could save 3.69 times more than 1997. The cumulative investment, you know, in a nominal value is like $31 million only. I mean, investment, $1 investment in 1984 is actually maybe 12, 13, $15 investment in 2007, because the time has, value added to this money invested, in an earlier time. So $31 million in total could save in these four instances, like 242.75 times more, damage and losses. But if we convert it to real value, I mean, today's value, this, amount like $31 million become $274.78 million. That we call the future value. And if we do this by, the bank rate, like 9% discounting, then it saved actually 52,118 million equivalent damage and losses. I mean, $52,118 million, equivalent damage and losses saved with these, investments. But I'm not saying that only these investments are made. These investments are made in those years only for household damage saving, crop damage, livestock damage, and infrastructure damage. And that, investments are made actually when the climate change discourses were not on the table. The climate change discourse is actually got momentum with the introduction of first the National Adaptation Plan of Action, that's NAPA in 2005, and then BCCSAP in 2008 and revised in 2009. So, and then the investment actually keep raising year by year because the discourses were stronger and stronger, through the years. So that's the point I wanted to make, that if we invest now, it is going to save more and more in future. Now, the idea 4, I have already discussed that money has a time value dimension. If we $1,000 today is actually, if we follow the timeline, $1,215 after 5 years. I mean, $1,000 today, if I have $1,000 in 2021, in 2025, this $1,000 should be $1,215 if I keep it in the bank with a 5% interest rate. I mean, the cost of capital. So it has a value. And if I have that, but if the government have that $1,000, and if the government invests, the government has, added advantage. It is called money multiplier. If the government invests, it increases 5-fold on an average. Like last year, it was 4.83, the money multiplier. It changes in different months in a year. So if I call it 5%, then $1,000, in addition to this value for money, it will be then around 6,000 US dollar after 5 years in 2025. So what is good? Keeping this money in the bank or invest this money right away so that people are not suffering from the next, incident, next super cyclone, next flood, next, landslide, or next anything. So that's the point. I will come to this because this is relevant to my discussions later, that whether it is good to keep the money in the bank or we should invest right away. So these were the ideas. Now, I will spend half a minute maybe. This is the timeline, what happened, from 1995 with the adoption of Bangladesh Environment Conservation Act, then NAPA in 2005, then 2009 we have BCCSAP. Originally it was in 2008, but updated in 2009. 2010 we have the first law, passed by the Parliament, the Climate Change Trust Act and Trust Fund. Under that, we have CPI started in 2012, 2014. We have adopted the first time the climate fiscal framework, which has given us the framework for the government how to combat climate change, how to invest, and how to adjust the budgetary system and the planning system together. Um, in 2015, under the guidance of the Paris Agreement, we have the NDCs and the SDGs altogether. In 2016, we had the country investment plan for environment, forest, and climate change, um, uh, which is for, in fact, 2016 to 2021. This is the last year. So we should look at how much we could implement and how much we couldn't because of this, resource inavailability or programming and so on. In 2008, we have introduced the climate performance audit guidelines with the Controller and Auditor General Office. In 2018, we had the Bangladesh Delta Plan, the 100-year plan. 18, we produced our pipeline projects for GCF, and in 2019 we have our perspective plan. So that's the architecture of climate change legal and policy framework. So I will not discuss in detail because most of you already know about this. And what is the problem of all these plans? Because we have too many of the plans. We have BCCSAP, at the same time we have NDC. But both has the same purpose. We have CIP, it has a kind of similar purpose. So what is the problem? There is two problems I can just point it here is that no properly costed plans. I mean, none of these plans are actually costed based on the climate change triggers. It says that this much amount of money will be needed, but how we are estimating this amount? Just for an example, if I take the CIPFCC, this is the last year, and from the budget tracking, I see that. I mean, if you just go to that, the climate budget report this year published, you will see that almost 95-97% of that plan is already funded. Does that mean that we could successfully implement that plan? I mean, as a person, I won't believe that. Because as a resource scarce country, we planned something and we implemented it. That is not yet to happen. So there was problem because the costing was properly not done. I'm pretty sure. So that is one problem. The second problem is we have plan, we have BDP, I mean the Delta plan, we have all these plans. None of these plans says if these plans are implemented successfully within its time frame, like we are a Western country, we could do it in full, how much risk it will reduce. Take my word. I mean, if BDP is implemented in its own timeline, in full, all the projects are implemented, how much risk will be reduced? And how much new risk will be added with that in the meantime, due to this new climatic changes and variability and all other things. So these are the missing links in those plans, strategies, laws, and so on. So this is the 2 point I would request you to remember because it will come again. And look at here, if you can see it, this is very small letters. I took 2 projects from BDP. And BDP is actually a water-centric master plan for the country and focusing mainly the climatic shocks and variability and hazards, disasters, and so on. If you see, these 2 projects are identical. One is rationalization of polders in Boleshwar Tetulia Basin. The other is the Poshur Basin. Identical projects, only the location is different. But you see in below the below left, 2 circles. The first circle says the potential for private sector investment. The second circle says the climate change investment. One circle says it has 20% climate financing potential. The other is saying no climate financing potential. How come this can be? same project in two different areas. One has climate change potential, other is not. This is only one instance. There are several many instances in this plan. We need to look into, we need to update because this is a living document. We need to put more efforts to make it, make it well, perfect. Not perfect, but good, better. So these are the things we need to improve. Now, the number 5 question I was asking, how much money is required to climate-proof development? Before that, we need to answer, how much of our national development plan is at risk of climate change? Is there any research? Unfortunately, I couldn't find any. So what I did, as per one of the unpublished research, by the way, this is part of my PhD research, I could come to a figure that, 77.18% of our annual development plan is actually at risk. I have, methodology which is like 10, 15, 20 pages, long, step by step, I could reach that point. So what is the amount of 77.18% in terms of 21-22 budget? The national budget is, now I'm talking about number 3 bullet to save some time. The ADP for 21-22 fiscal year is about what? 225,324 crores, something like that, which is equivalent to 26,508 million US dollar. My study also provides me some idea about, how much money is actually needed to climate-proof this 77.18% or 26,508 million US dollar developmental interventions. There are a range, like there are some projects, like agricultural projects, the irrigation projects, 3.2% minimum to 24% maximum money is needed. Additional money is needed to climate-proof, these developmental projects. And if we just, give weightage and then come to a central figure, it is like 11.42%. So I took this average. I would not say this average, but 11.4 to a central point and calculate how much money is actually needed. So let's go to the next slide. Accordingly, 3024. If I take this 11.42%, $3,027.29 million is actually needed to climate-proof that 77.18% of the annual development program for 2021-22, the current year. And the question comes, how much is actually available? And then the role of this climate finance tracking comes, because not all this 77.18% is actually developmental. As a Delta D country, we are already implementing climate smart interventions, even before the climate discourses has started. I have read through the budget, speeches since 1971. It is in the Finance Division's website already. So if you read through those budget speeches, you will find that they considered climate change things. I mean, not very succinctly, but they talked about, this thing, that thing, how to, do something smart or like that. So if you see the trajectory, we kept investing in climate adaptation from a very long time, because we are a Delta D country, we cannot live without adapting. So adaptation was there and is there. So the climate finance tracking is actually, the methodology actually tracking what we are investing in addition to the business as usual or the baseline scenario. You remember the first idea I talked you to agree on is that additionality. Business as usual, climate is already there, but additionality means what additional money we are putting to make it more climate smart, to offset the additional risks that are being imposed with the additional climate, change and variability and so on. So using that methodology, the climate change budget report 21-22, it says that 14,838.81 crore is already embedded within the development budget. There is some more. I mean, in total it is 25,000, but 14,838 crore is embedded within the development budget, which is equivalent to 1,745 million US dollar. It is already there. Then it has a gap of how much? 1,281.55 billion, which is 42.33% of required climate proofing finance. You see, after this long discussion, we came to a point where we know how much money, additional money is actually needed, which is 1,281 million. We are not talking about 1 crore, 2 crore. We are talking about 1,281 million US dollars. It's a big amount of money. Now the question remains how we finance that money. Okay, there are some options. Maybe I will discuss soon. But before that, let me tell you some idea about how the climate finance, public finance tracking methodology and approach works. So what we did, we aligned the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan with the budget setting process. And the BCCSAP, it has 6 thematic areas and 44 program areas. We took that 44 program areas as indicators for our tracking module. And this module is already been embedded within the government's IBUS. We call it IBUS, the Integrated Budget and Accounting System. So it is already embedded there. So it is not about putting your subjectivity in it, my subjectivity in it. So it's not like that. Every year we produce climate budgets that should be consistent. This year 7%, that year 20%. That is not expected. So what we did, we standardized things. We standardized their weights. We standardized their climate additionality part and so on. And we embedded it in the system. So the budget desk officer sitting in the Agriculture Ministry, he has a list of all 10 new projects to be included in ADP for this year. He has that 10 project. He has the details of that 10 project. If he goes to this climate change module, there are like which thematic areas this project actually addresses. So that person selects this thematic area and which program area under that thematic area is actually aligned to the to this project. So as soon as select it, the program itself is designed in such a way that it calculates, because the budget value is already there within the system. So it takes the value from there, it calculates how much money is actually for climate change. So it's not you and me who are formulating this climate budget report. It is like hundreds of people across the government. They are formulating this budget report. Person like me or someone sitting in the finance division is actually downloading the tables and the graphs and putting it in a report and printing it and sending it to the parliament. That is what it is happening for the climate budget report. And let me tell you, and mark my word, that is not happening in any part of the world. Being a transitional country, we have made this system so efficient that no one needs to do anything extra any year. Everyone is doing their bit and the things are being processed automatically, digitally. Well, this is, a narrative of the digital Bangladesh as well. So this is how it works. And if I show you, I mean, I'm just, I'll be going through very fast. There are 2 approaches available globally, 2 established approaches. One is the objective-based approach that was actually been offered by UNFCC's OECD DAC in 1998 for mitigation and 2010 for adaptation. So what are they saying? They are saying if a project or program has like two objectives, if one objective has a direct climate change linkages, they call it a principle like a climate change thing, and other is not directly related, maybe a part of it, they are calling, no, this is not climate related. So that is how they were, calculating. So the risk is we are actually downsizing our climate investments because we are not considering part. Like if 50% of an investment is climate sensitive, we are saying, no, it is not, following this approach. It must have to be 100%. But, just make my point is that not 100% of any project should be or is climate change project. Development is closely linked with climate change things. So that is the first approach. The second approach is the benefit based approach, so the cost benefit analysis. But the problem is that many, 90% of our projects and programs that are included in the ADP is formulated in such a way that it has no cost benefit analysis. So how can I adopt this approach for climate finance tracking? If we take a project to conduct a cost benefit analysis for those projects and then do climate financing, it will take like 3, 4, 5 years. By 3 years, all these 1,500 projects will be phased out and the new project will come. And then we will be racing again, until and unless we include a cost benefit analysis in our project development pro forma, so that every project readily comes with a cost benefit analysis. Only then we can adopt this approach. But for now, this is no way possible for us to adopt this approach. But let me tell you, this is the best approach ever available yet. So we are not going to catch this one because this is not possible, though it is ideal. Here I put one example from Germany. Germany, they have studied and found their rating, like early warning system. If we invest something, and then the cost ratio, benefit cost ratio should be like minimum 5 and the maximum is 8. For agriculture, buffer strips, minimum 20, maximum 97, and the average is 20, minimum 1.9 and maximum 97. So if we could do some kind of economy-wide study for all these 15, 16, 1700 ADP projects, and we could develop some kind of standards, and then only we could, this is another way we could, improve our tracking methodology to a cost benefit analysis things. So this is one example that we can follow, but this is not yet available, or none of the studies are ongoing in this regard. Okay, so what are we doing then? So we took bit of the first approach, bit of the second approach. We took the objective part from the OECD DAC thing, and we took the cost part only, not benefit, because estimating the benefit is too much right now. So we took objective, like which objective is related to climate, which objective is actually climate smart, and what percentage of that climate objective is actually climate investment. So that is the core of our methodology. Now, coming from that methodology, if I just tell you that methodology, what is the entry point? Here, this circle is actually telling you the budget setting process. The process starts with policy and economic planning first, the macroeconomic framework. Every year, this becomes part of the budget document, the macroeconomic framework, and then institutional support for planning and budgeting process. The red mark text are actually the entry points where we should work on to integrate the climate change into it. What we did from from the project, the IBFSR project, one of the discussion is, leading Mr. Ranjit Chakravarti, the inclusive budgeting and financing for climate resilience. I was also working there for more than 5 years. So these are the areas, the red marked areas we identified that we need to interface the climate things into it. I will not go into detailed discussion because of this time limitation. Maybe in another discussion we could explore all these things, one by one. But one thing I forgot to mention is that we started with the budget call circular. Budget call circular is the circular that finance ministry provides to all the other ministries that how they should formulate their budget for the next year and what are the priorities, what are the areas they should prioritize, while formulating their budget request, the grant request or demand for grant. So in that, circular, we included climate change as a priority. First thing we did. And then when we included that, every ministry, they were kind of bound, I should say, to include climate change investments in their ministry budget frameworks. Okay? So that is part of the MTBF, the medium-term budget framework, and so on. So that is another school we'll discuss later. And this is the tracking methodology, and this is the actual book which is already in the finance division's website. This is the link. You can download it and read it through. And I will just go through the next 4 or 5 slides. This is the detail how the climate finance tracking methodology is developed. This is the statistical tools and so on. And this has like 4 steps, like 1, 2, 3, 4, aligned with the climate change strategy and action plan. And how it works, the formulas and so on. One must not follow all these formulas because this is already embedded within the IBAS system. So you only need to include the project, need to align this with the BCCSP thematic areas and program areas, and the climate financing figure will be generated and the tables, graphs will generated automatically through the system. And this is the exercise that we have done to implement that 4 steps. Like when we get some projects, like this one is the food security thing, and then what are the possible projects that can happen, what are the instances that we followed, like before 2005 or 2009 when the climate change discourses were not there, how many instances we were implementing that project or that investment. And now after 10-15 years of climate discourses, the different documents that we formulated, how much we are doing. So if one call it climate sensitivity and climate relevance, and then the difference is actually the additional. Take an example. Before 2005 or 2009, when the climate discourses started to begin in the country, maybe 1 out of 10 new rice varieties were, saline tolerant or fast elongating in the flash flood zone or in the, flood zones. But now, when we ask them, okay, now it is 2016, because we employed this one in 2016 first time. In 2016, out of 10 varieties, how many of the varieties you consider that should be climate relevant? They said, okay, before it was like 2, because we knew that the salinity is there, flash flood is there, but the climate change and the future scenarios are there. Now we consider climate change for 8 out of 10, new varieties we introduce. Maybe 2 other varieties is actually for, more production and so on. But the 8 out of 10 is actually considering either salinity or drought or, submergence or fast elongating, slow elongating, this thing, that thing, and so on. So what is the difference? 2 and 8. If 2 is 20 and 8 is 80, the difference is 60. So additionality, we call it additionality 60%. So that means if we invest 100 taka today for new variety improvement, we can tell that 60 taka is actually for additional climate change financing. So this is how the methodology is actually developed. And there is so many of the things we could discuss, maybe in a new, in another lecture we will discuss. And this is the indicators, the 46 thematic areas and programs. I just took few as a snapshot for you. This is the values we came into, like 73%, 69%, 66% for against, like adaptation in livestock sector is about 48% for climate addition. I mean, 48% new investment is being done after climate discourse is on the table. So that is what, or that should be done, but we are not actually being able to invest that amount of money because of this, scarce, limited resource availability and so on. But that should be that we have, and this is the budget report every year since 2017-18 that is being part of the budget documents and being sent to the parliament for the parliamentarians to see and inform them how much of their ministries or how much of each of the ministries, each of the projects are climate relevant, and what additional, what more we can do in terms of climate change. And link is there. We can also download that from Finance Division's website.
Sumon, can I ask you to try to wrap up now?
Yeah, not much left now. So this is the tables that we generate from IBUS. This is the thematic area wise investments. This is the program area wise investments. The bigger the area, the bigger the amount actually for climate change. So this is it. And if I show you the trajectory, the blue one is actually telling us the nominal value. I mean the amount of money we are investing. But if we convert this money to a previous value, like 2015-16, to a base year, the progress is actually not too much in a real value. So we need to invest more and more because today's money is actually less in 2015-16's value. So this is the thing. This is also the trend in different thematic areas, how it is increasing or decreasing. We see that infrastructure is getting priority, mitigation is getting more priority, food security as percentage of the climate change budget is reducing. Maybe we have invested already too much. Comprehensive disaster management, this is a paradoxical situation that I can discuss it here. Follow number 2. The graph says that the real investment, not in nominal terms. I mean, if we discount this, in 2015-16 term, the investment in comprehensive disaster management area is actually been reducing, and it has been reduced 23.15% compared to 2015-16, investment. Why is that? No research is there yet, but what we can tell that, maybe something big didn't happen. That is why you forgot that something big can happen. And when something big happens, we will start again to invest much. So this is the thing. We are planning reactively. That is the whole point of making this graph. We are investing. We are planning reactively, not planning proactively. We need to do that. As part of the solution, if we see the BCCTF, here is a huge gap. I will take, 2-3 more minutes to wrap up my discussions. This is you don't need to follow this data, but what are the points I want to make? I want to tell that, as part of the regulations, 34% of the money is actually deposited to the bank, whatever the government is allocating to this fund, and remaining 66% is being invested. So what are we actually gaining out of this 34%? The bank interest. The bank is giving you like 7, 8%, 9%. 5% is actually gone with the inflation. What you have? 3, 4%. And what is the cost of the capital? 4, 5%. What you have? Absolutely nothing, maybe minus. Your money is actually reducing in the bank. Instead, if you could invest the day it was allocated, we could have saved a lot of resources, lot of lives maybe. And one estimate in my research says that the opportunity cost that we have missed is like 2,511.66 million worth of loss and damage we could save if we spend this money right away without, letting it idle in the bank. So it's a huge amount of money, 2,511.66 million US dollar savings of loss and damage. Going forward, this is the BCCTF things, because I wanted to say something about this thing. Okay, what we could do is not to keep this money in the bank. We could invest, that I already said. But what we should do, that is the last 2 slides I had. Only 5 bullets. What we should do, I think, from my experience and from all this analysis, I think that, this trust fund is a very good thing, the super thing that we have now at hand. And we should use it differently, not the way it is now. We should make this facility, we should make this fund as a facility, so that these 1,600 projects that are being developed as part of the ADP process, the annual development plan process, these projects can apply for climate proofing, finance from this facility. So that one project like 100 crore taka project, they need additional 11 crore taka for climate proofing. They can apply for that money to this, board or the trust. Give me that money so that I can make my project, climate proof. So that is one point I want to make, that change it. Change the way we are doing. Don't keep the money in the bank. It is just, it is creating imbalance in the market system, because it is additional money not meant to be in the market. This money could save hundreds of lives, maybe in tomorrow's, in next year's cyclone or beyond. Okay, and the second thing is that since 17-18, budget, we are producing the budget report, and we have the methodology and the data information we are producing. This is very good. This is very, very good. But there is one problem. One problem is that we are estimating or calculating or extracting how much money is there, which is already planned. But we need to be more smarter. We need to embed this methodology in the ADP development process, so that before, making our plan, we know how much money we are actually putting for climate change. Not necessarily make your own plan and then see how much money is there for climate change. We need to be smart enough. We are working already IBFCR project that we have already, and the National Adaptation Program formulation, National Adaptation Plan formulation project. We are already working with the Planning Commission and the Programming Division to embed this system, the tracking system, within the project formulation process, so that from the day one, we can tell how much money we are proactively, putting for climate change. So that is the 2, points I wanted to make after this long, speech. So hope, you are there to, disseminate this thing and take this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sumon, for that very, very elaborate and detailed presentation. Very impressive. Thank you. There are already a number of questions for you in the chat box, so I would recommend you have a look at them while we hear from our 2 designated discussants, and then we'll come back to you if you want to answer those questions. So first, it's my great pleasure to invite Mr. Ranjit Chakravarti, who is has a lot of knowledge about what you've spoken about. He's been involved in this as well. in helping the government of Bangladesh do this very, very elaborate climate finance exercises and incorporating it into our national budgeting and planning. You have quite rightly said that I don't think any other country has just this level of detail in terms of dealing with the climate change issues in our national budget. Always we can improve, we should improve, but I think we are already well ahead of many other countries, and we can share our experience with the other countries going forward. So Ranjit Babu, please let me give you the floor. Please share your thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Salimul Haq. Am I audible enough?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In fact, after Sumon's elaborate presentation, I shouldn't take that long, with my discussion, because he has already taken around an hour.
Yeah,
so,
5 minutes if it's okay with
your
you.
Your time budget is only 1.5 hours. So what should I do?
5 minutes, please. Just the highlights
5 minutes.
from your point of view.
Okay, I will just highlight, some of the salient points, or rather, some of the salient features of Sumon's discussion, rather.
And also, Ranjit, if I can ask you to give us a little bit of what you think needs to be done going forward, not looking back, but looking forward.
No, I'm not going to be, that much, historical, in, making my presentation. So I'm not going to trace the history, or rather background too much. So we know about the background, but climate finance as such came into currency very recently in the world. But it is gaining increasing focus in the development discourse all around the world. And for the climate vulnerable countries like ours, it is extremely important.
Ranjit, শুনতে পাচ্ছি না।
Okay, can you hear me now?
আমি শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
পাচ্ছেন, আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে, তাহলে go ahead.
Okay, should I go ahead? I think
yes, go ahead. It's my system. Yeah. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sumon, today's presenter, in his quite elaborate presentation, has made the audience familiarized with different concepts and ideas surrounding the topic, and also presented a critic on the current pattern of resource allocation. And I congratulate him for undertaking this rigorous exercise to comprehensively cover different dimensions of the topic. I would rather choose to limit my discussion to climate public finance management only. So if I request Sumon to just show that slide, the last slide, on public financial management cycle, that would be good for us. It would be easier for me to discuss this cycle. The last, that one, yes. Public financial management cycle. Yes, please stay on this slide. So can I use this slide, for my discussion today?
Please go ahead.
Let us not bother about the arrows. The arrows are all interventions. These are, continuously these interventions will take place. But what this cycle tell us about? I think for the researchers and also the students of your university, it is quite important to know about the features of this cycle. Here within this cycle, we see two different streams of activities. One is upstream activities, which starts with policy and economic planning and budget formulation, budget execution, audit and evaluation. And there is another stage which is called parliamentary oversight. So this is the cycle. Why it is cycle? Because this will just move on. This will not stop anywhere. So starting from policy and economic planning, as Sumon in his presentation mentioned, that we start with, while setting budget, we start with the macroeconomic situation of the country. So that provides us the input for budget formulation. This is one thing. And in Bangladesh, we have got a kind of budget setting process which is output focused, as opposed to what we used to do in the past, the traditional budget setting process, which was input focused. The third stage is budget execution. In budget execution, what we do, we get the approval from the parliament of the budget, then we implement the budget, and then we account for it, and then we go for reporting. And based on the reports that we produced after spending money, it is independently audited by an agency called Supreme Audit Institution in Bangladesh. And anywhere in the country, anywhere else in the world, it is called Supreme Audit Institution. In Bangladesh, we call it Office of the Comptroller Auditor General in Bangladesh. And then the reports travel down to the parliament, which is called parliamentary oversight. And the parliamentarians look at the reports, and then they give their recommendations, which are then fed back into policy formation. That's why it is called cycle. Now, this is the cycle around which we are making different interventions. This is what we call public finance management reforms. These interventions are reforms. Now, climate finance, when climate finance came into currency in Bangladesh, we tried to make our interventions around this cycle. Say, for example, macroeconomic framework, what we developed, and it is now obligatory on the part of the Minister for Finance to prepare medium-term macroeconomic policy statement every year before presenting the budget, while presenting the budget. So budget setting process is rooted into macroeconomic considerations. That's why we chose to take up that framework to make it climate inclusive. And when we started setting our budget, we issued budget call circular, and those call circular provides strategic direction to the sector ministries and ask them how to embed climate dimension in their resource allocation process. So that is what we are doing right now. And we have already covered 25 ministries, and these ministries on their own, using the system that Sumon has already mentioned, just input their data and produce their budget. It is called ministry budget framework. And within this ministry budget framework, we show how much resources have been allocated for climate change. And this is separately shown in each and every ministry budget framework. And this budget travels down to Parliament for approval. And once it is approved by the Parliament, then the executive government starts implementing it. So while implementing this budget or executing the budget, what we basically do, we just capture the expenditure that has been spent, and the amount that is captured in the system, we track down the climate portion of the whole expenditure, and that is also reported to Parliament. Now, once these are done, the budget is executed, budget is approved by the Parliament, and what happens after that? It has to be checked by an independent agency, as I mentioned, and we also provided support to the Auditor General's office to carry out climate performance audit. And what is the purpose of this kind of audit? It is all about reduction of fiduciary risk, because when there is an investment, there is every chance of waste, every chance of misappropriation, leakage, corruption. And to reduce all these risks, we have to have a kind of objective evaluation of the projects or of the investment projects that we implement. And once these evaluation is completed, then the Auditor General reports to the Parliament, as I mentioned earlier. Then the parliamentarians look at the reports, and then they provide recommendations to the executive government to calibrate their policy formulation. Now, let me come to the, have I spent 5 minutes? Can I go for another one more minute?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Now, why this climate public financial management is so important? It is important because of the fact that the funders, I mean, funding from different sources. It is not only government. It is not only Bangladesh Parliament. We receive funds from various sources, and the funders always will ask for, or will hold us accountable for the resources they allocate for us. And the allocation should be used for the purpose for which they are meant. Now, this is important. That's why the relevance of climate public finance management comes in. And if there is no efficient public finance management system, no one will place reliance on the spenders, because even with the government, and that's why the government has been implementing public financial management reforms since mid-1990s. We have already spent 25 years and we are still going on. And currently, the government is implementing a strategy called Public Financial Management Reform Strategy, 16 to 2021, and that is still going on. So the relevance of climate public finance is extremely important for us, and we should lay more emphasis on the system, on strengthening the system in future years as we move forward, and try to establish greater or enhanced efficiency and also accountability, responsiveness, and probity in climate investment. That is the whole purpose of putting in place climate public financial management system in the country. I'm thankful to the organizers for inviting me, because coming from public finance background, I think it is an obligation on my part to share my thoughts. And as an elderly citizen, thank you for allowing me to make a foray into your world. I mean, those who are young here, to recharge myself from your immense vitality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ranjit, for your excellent thoughts. And it's always a pleasure to listen to you and learn from you. I always find I learn a lot from you by listening to you. So thank you very much. And I'm pretty sure my students will feel the same. So let me now, without further ado, invite our second designated discussant, my colleague, Professor Mizan Khan. Mizan, please go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Salim. Yes, thank you, Dr. Abu Sumon, for very detailed and very technical presentation. Most of it was very technical. I think your presentation did fly over the heads of those who don't have any basic handling on disease. Anyway, so this is a very, very pioneering attempt, and we congratulate you and the government of Bangladesh for initiating this, because once we can quantify the costing of mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage, then the domestic planning will have more effect, as well as internationally, we can speak with authority about our needs, for example, for climate finance, for international support. Here, I will mention few just broad points. As you mentioned about two kind of approaches, objective-based methodology and also benefit cost analysis. Yeah, Rio markets have got many difficult problems, many manipulations in averaging even out. There are serious problems. That is why Germany, for example, does kind of deflated by 50%. But in benefit cost calculation also, there are serious problems, because cost calculation is easier. There is not much kind of ambiguity in that. But benefit calculation, particularly, for example, from an adaptation project or from a nature conservation project, is extremely difficult. And let me give the example of a conservation of Sundarbans. As a project, we have to invest money. We know the cost. how much stuff will be needed from the forest department or other expenses. But how do we value the benefits of Sundarbans? Because we don't need, we don't eat the meat of Royal Bengal tigers. So what are the benefits of Sundarbans? There are some economic benefits, certainly, but partially you can calculate in terms of good habitat for fishes, for example, or in terms of timber or other non-timber forest products. But the kind of conservation of Royal Bengal tigers itself is a value that we must put money on. That is where we need not only just to follow the economic criteria, but also some higher values like ethical values for conservation of Sundarbans Royal Bengal tigers. So this is just an example. That is why we need to follow, as you mentioned, Abu Sumon, to follow through the multi-criteria analysis. That is what really we needed. My second point is, if we look at the investments so far, then you mentioned in your paper that 77% of the ADP is not covered, is not brought under the climate change impacts. So most of these BCCTF projects are kind of development projects as well as extremely politically biased. That is why this gap in ADP, internalization of climate change in ADP is happening. This is not certainly a welcome development. That is why two ministers, Borishal even exceeded the Chittagong minister when these allocations were done. So this is absolutely no basis for economic considerations or cost-benefit analysis. And then I have another comment that you mentioned about BCCF to serve as a facility. So once we have the budget line for climate investments and government budget allocation, then I think BCCTF should kind of think of its new role as you have suggested. But how to do it? I think for serving as a facility for climate proofing development, we need to have more technical experts in the BCCTF experts. Otherwise, you know, that task that you are referring to or is suggesting about is extremely difficult for government bureaucrats or for non-technical experts. This is what I will just finish in 2-3 minutes. Then I have some suggestions. For example, you're absolutely right. In Bangladesh, we need to build capacity for economic modeling, where we are really weak. Economic modeling for costing of our mitigation, adaptation, and loss and damage projects. You mentioned just one number, about $2.5 billion could have been saved if this money staying in the banks would have invested. You know, so this is just an example that our government official, there is a saying, Sarkari mal dariya mein dhal. You know, so our government officials and policy makers need to understand the value of money, where it does bring in, you know, better benefits for the country, and that consideration is not much there. And there is a theory, public choice theory in America, and the authors of this theory also got Nobel Prize. Their argument is that government officials don't spend their own money, not money from their own pocket. So why they should be so considerate about efficiency and cost effectiveness? This is an American way of thinking, but there is some rationale in that across all governments. That is why this IBUS system is extremely important. But together with IBUS system, we need to activate the Right to Information Act. Because if the citizens don't know how much money has been allocated or is allocated to a specific project, then IBUS system doesn't have any meaning for the citizens. So what we need is to make citizens, as the budget maker, for example, as the budget follower, and so that they can question. So these are all. And
Thank you.
also, we need to do some more work, as Sumon, you have mentioned about the costing of loss and damage, because loss and damage is coming in a big way in future years. That is why if we have numbers, then our hands are strengthened nationally as well as international. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mizan. We don't have very much time left. So what I will do is ask Sumon to respond both to the two discussants, but also to some of the questions which have already been put in the chat box. So I hope you had a chance to read them, and give you the floor to respond to as many questions as you can and to the two discussants. Sumon, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Well, first going to the participants, there are 3 or 4 very vital comments. One is from Dr. Nurunhar from Planning Commission, Programming Division. She's the joint chief there. She raised a vital question. I mean, in terms of BCCTF, until and unless we bring this on budget, I mean, BCCTF now is a off budget operation, extra budgetary operation, we would say. So we can bring that in, and that might be a solution. But why I was, talking about, using this as a facility outside the formal process of doing. I mean, everything is formal, but the within the system of ADP implementation, then it becomes like a project. So instead, I was telling it to use its flexibility that is given by the law. It can approve its own projects. It can give or not give or anything. So that is why I was a bit inclined to keep it like this way and use the benefits that it can deliver in terms of flexibility. Thank you, Dr. Mizan sir, that the technical abilities and the capacity is very vital, be it for the government, be it for BCCTF or anywhere. Political economy is obviously there, and this is not very easy to win that part. But gradually and steadily, we are possibly going to a right direction so that we can make good decisions in good time. The another part of Dr. Nurunhar's comment is that we are not, actually planning reactively. We are planning proactively. I also agree on that. I made that, my comment based on the data, that how the data is, I just tried to explain the data, but obviously we are following our 5-year plans, the perspective plans and so on. But you rightly pointed out that the priority is the key. Which project to invest where? Efficient use of resources is the key. How we can efficiently and effectively use all the resources that are available. So I agree with your points. The point you raised and the suggestion from my part is 2 different and parallel options. Anyone we can take and implement that is possibly is going to deliver the same result. Mr. Hasib, he raised one question regarding the scenarios. The scenarios, if there is the scenarios built for each of the priority sectors. Yes, there are different scenarios built for the sectors, and you'll be happy to know that, as part of the National Adoption Plan formulation process, we have already, prepared, scenarios for 4 or 5 and cross-cutting sectors. The report will be available pretty soon. So hope we will get that report by the end of this year or early next year. So So that is it. You also asked whether how we can proactively, make our plans and so on. Obviously, we can, and we are doing, but there are areas that we need to improve, including the political economy and our prioritization problem. This is all about, institutional culture and individual culture. This is nothing to do about the system itself. System is okay. We need to change ourselves. Only then we can, improve that. Dr. Khaled from IUCN raised a question about the climate finance tracking thing. He's telling us that whether we need to engage the experts to assess the projects and programs so that it can be better realized how much money is actually for climate change. Here, I want to just inform you that we have done that part, and as it is a evolving process, dynamically evolving process, as soon the new BCCSP comes, we need to adjust with that new BCCSP, the IBAS system and that new one, so that we are updated and we are reporting as per the national strategy, the newly adopted national strategy. So what we did, when estimating that climate additionality, we discussed with the climate experts. Somehow you might be missing from that list, but we discussed with the intermediaries, like at the district level and so on. We also took this to the union parishad level. I mean, we had pilot unions, so we discussed with them whether they agree with this, that this much should be invested, or this much is actually being invested as additional to the business as usual investment thing. So these exercise is already embedded in the IT system. We are not updating this every year. Maybe in every 4 or 5 years, when the situation changes, we need to update that one. And you are very right that we need to engage the experts in this regard, so that the assessment is more precise. But recall my point, what I said, we don't want to continue for long to track what is already being planned. We want to track what is going to be planned and embed into that. And that should be target based. Like the Ministry for Disaster Management should be targeting, like this year we will invest 12% of our total budget for climate investments. Ministry of Environment is little more. LGD should be like 7, 8, 9, 10% space directly to the climate. I mean, that should be target based, target oriented things, not necessarily that we do and then check, okay, autonomously how much it is there. So that was some of the things I wanted to respond, and thank you very much, sir. If I miss anything, I'm very sorry. The time is not there to discuss further. But I'm copying your questions. I will respond to you separately in email or phone call or Zoom call, whatsoever.
Thank you.
Thank
you very much, Sumon, for your excellent and I would say extremely patient delivery and response to the questions. And as Mizan pointed out, this is quite a technical subject. In fact, I was lost for quite a while myself. I don't claim to be a climate finance expert by any means. I know a little bit, but you obviously know a lot more. But what I want to just conclude with is 3 things. Firstly, to appreciate how far Bangladesh has come. I say this everywhere in the world. Bangladesh, we do a lot of things. We have a lot of criticism. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of improvement that can be done, but we have come a long way. And I think that we should acknowledge that, and we should be proud of that. Secondly, as we move along, we have to learn. We should not be repeating mistakes. If we did something wrong last year, let us see if we can improve it this year. So every new opportunity, every new budget, every new plan, let us see if we can improve on the previous one. And instead of criticizing it for not being perfect, because there's no such thing as a perfect plan, let us see how we improve it in practical, incremental steps. We cannot change everything overnight. It takes time to change things significantly, but we must try. And I personally feel very, very strongly that the climate change problem globally is just beginning. You know, a few days ago, we saw the floods in Germany. And right now, in fact, I was watching the floods in Belgium again, second time. They had floods a few days ago. They have flash floods again today. China is getting floods again today. So we have actually moved into a climate change world. These are all loss and damage from human-induced climate change. This is no longer natural events. And so, and they'll only get worse. And Bangladesh will get hit again. So we have to now be better prepared with our economic and financial and fiscal calculations and predictions and evidence of what has happened, and as well as predictions of what is likely to happen, so that we, first of all, do what we can with our own resources, but also we make a case for international support from the rest of the world, which has been promised but has not been delivered. And so I would be very interested in exploring with you later how we might join forces together. And I invite Ranjit also to be part of this conversation. Can we come up with a longer term financial estimate of the cost of loss and damage from climate change, looking back to how much we can estimate, and then looking forward to what is it that we likely can predict or can build scenarios on, in order to use that as a global figure in international negotiations and discussions that are taking place as we speak right now. In fact, you may know that there is a ministerial meeting that started just a few hours ago in London, where the COP26 presidency has invited ministers from around the world to come and discuss. So these are very active discussions going on, and finance is one of the biggest issues. Always, climate finance is a big, big, big politically contentious issue. And for Bangladesh to have a strong position, we need good data. We need good numbers from our own country that we can prove, we can show people. This is what it's costing, this is what it will cost, and this is what we are doing ourselves, and this is what we need. If we can do these simple figures with good evidence, then we'll be in a very strong position. So let me thank you again, Sumon, and also Ranjit and Mizan, for being with us today. We will have a recording of this. We will share this with others who are not able to join us today. We do get quite a lot of people watching the recordings of our lectures afterwards. So it's a good record to have. It's a good a video document for people to refer to in future as well. And you'll also put up your PowerPoint presentation if you share that with us. So with that, let us call it a day today. And thank everybody for joining us and be with us. Can I, before we close, ask people to turn on your cameras so we can take a screenshot with as many people who are with us today as possible. And I hope that my students, the master's students at IUB, as well as my younger colleagues in ICAD, as well as those who have joined from outside, have found this to be a useful event and something. And to advertise the second one, we have another lecture coming up. Sumon has not finished his imparting his knowledge and experience with us. So I hope you'll come back the second time. We'll be announcing that soon as well. Unless, Ruxar, do you want to announce the date and time for the second lecture?
Yes, sir. The second lecture is on the 12th. That is the Thursday. So 12th August, we have the second lecture, and the time is the same, from 5 to 6:30.
Great. Thank you very much. Have you taken the photograph?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Let us say goodbye for now, and we'll
Bye.
see you on the 12th of August again, hopefully.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.